Ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for coming today, and it's really my privilege to introduce a very vocal member of my faculty in the College of Humanities and Fine Arts. Dr. Roberto Mancusi joined the UTM faculty in 2008. He was promoted to professor in 2020. He's performed with a number of symphonies and on a number of CDs. And you can hear his work in a variety of places, including YouTube, but on CDs and other things. Probably here at UTM, we know him best for his Villains and his Villains concert. If you missed that, you missed really a delightful evening. And you need to ask him to be the Grinch for a while. But today, we're going to hear about a really unusual project, and one that I think really caught a lot of us where we were living at the moment, and I think can still help us deal with where we were a couple years ago. And that is the opera that he wrote with Dr. Mark Simmons, who was also at that point one of our choral music professors. And it's an opera called The New Normal. And they wrote it to be performed online. This was in the middle of COVID. And we're talking COVID when we were all working from home and feeling very isolated and struggling to figure out how to make things work. And I want you to think for a moment. Now, those of you in music, if you remember how it was, but for the rest of us, think for a moment about learning a skill, an art that often requires somebody talking and observing how you breathe, how you form sounds with your mouth, you observing them doing something similar. It involves pitch that can be distorted over speakers. And you're trying to teach this online, not in person. And it becomes a whole different thing. Plus, that first semester, as those of you who were here will remember, we started out in person. And so our classes were not designed to go online. And we had to figure out in 4 days how to move from in-person to online. And as students, you know, but as faculty members too, you don't just go online. It really has to be thought out, and you have to approach it differently. And that's part of what this is about. And it captured it well enough that Dr. Mancusi was a semifinalist for the American Prize for Composers for this work. And the work itself was a finalist for the American Prize in Virtual Performance. This not only caught people's imaginations, it is a really solid piece of work. And so today, telling us about how he got there, Dr. Mancusi is presenting Thinking Inside the Box. Dr. Mancusi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alexander. And I'd like to thank Dr. Nordberg for inviting me to this. When he first asked, he made sure to tell me all the logistics, and he made me promise that I would keep this talk to under 3 hours. So I'm going to attempt to do that. I have students here that are already in on the joke. But what's really cool, I didn't know who all was going to be here. And we have 4 of the performers that are in this opera are sitting here. And they have no idea that they're even included in terms of their own solo things, and that I'm going to talk about them. But as Dr. Alexander alluded to, this happened the summer after we had our lockdown. My friend Mark, he would usually go to Phoenix for the summers. And as soon as we went to lockdown and we knew we weren't coming back, he went to Phoenix. So we wrote out the rest of the semester. Everybody did the best that they could. And this is where this all started. And as I was thinking about the presentation, I thought about the fact that it really can be boiled down to 4 Ps. And the 4 Ps are pitch, panic, process, and presentation. And they are in that order. So the pitch was when he called me. This was about the middle, just the front side of the middle of May. The semester had just ended, and he was asking how everything went. I said, it was fine. How about you? He said, about as good as can be expected. He goes, do you know if we're going to be back in the fall? We're going to be in person? What, your guess is as good as mine. And we chit-chatted for a while, and he said, what are we going to do about performances? He'd already started thinking about how he was going to do his choir stuff, and then he went, well, what about the opera next year? I went, I just finished the semester. I'd kind of like to take a time out for just a second. But he said, we need to figure something out. If we aren't going to come back, we should do something. And I said, okay, well, we'll probably just pick an opera and figure out a way to put it online. But that was the hard part, because at the end of that semester, the former chair had wanted to do a virtual alma mater, and she asked me if I had the technical know-how to do it. Hadn't a clue. And I read a number of articles, and it realized it was going to be way more daunting a process than I had thought. So I respectfully declined, and she found somebody else. I participated, but I had no idea what to do. Fast forward to this conversation with Mark, and he's saying, oh, we're not just going to do one song. Let's do an entire opera that way. Do you think you can figure that out? So through the course of the conversation, I said, well, it sounds like fun. We'll see what we can, let me think about it. And I hung up the phone. And that's where the panic comes in, because all of the thoughts started flooding into my head. What was I going to have to do? I was going to have to write this music. And there's no story, so it means I had to write the words too. But then how was I going to do this? I had to learn how to figure, how to put this together, how to create this. Is it even possible? Like I said, the articles were telling me this was a very daunting task, but I had to make sure that it was somehow accessible to the students. If you think of it, it went through my head. And then the biggest question that went through my head is, why am I going to do this? And after I went through all the process, I went, why not? I have nothing to lose. The summer had just started. There was nothing else on our plate. In fact, for all of us, we weren't even supposed to leave our house, so there was plenty of time. And I thought, it's a no-lose situation. I can't fail. If I get to the end of summer and I can't write these pieces, I can't figure this out, we're still where we are right now. We pick an opera that's already been done, we figure out how to put it online, and we're done. And even if let's say I was able to compose the music, but we start having glitches and I can't figure out the software, or I start having problems, all of the glitches and things that were in the production would only enhance the idea of this being online. So it was really relieving to realize there was no way to fail at this. So why not try for 3 months and see what happens? So I sat down. He called about a Tuesday or so. It was early in the week. That Saturday, I was flooded with ideas. But the first part was I had to figure out what this was going to be about. And I sent him some texts and some emails. I wanted to make sure we dealt with the emotions that the students had expressed in the classes, the emotions that we had expressed going into this, all the people that had to pivot and figure out how to do this on the fly, being told that we were only going to do it for 2 weeks, and then the semester went on. We were all there. So trying to get all of those kinds of things and put that in and really express what everybody was feeling. So I talked to Mark. I said, what kind of class are we going to do? You know, we could do a music class. We'll probably lose a lot of the audience that really has no idea. You know, if we do a music theory class, you know, people are going to get into halfway into the first song and go, so we didn't want to do that. But then do we pick something else that's somewhere else on campus, a math class, an English class? Well, we don't know what goes on in those classes, so there goes any chance of that being successful. And he said, what about this? What if it was a study class for a test that has to be taken at the end of a degree? And my mind immediately went to my doctoral comprehensive exams. You know, we had 24 hours of tests, and you got 3 chances to pass them, and after the 3rd time, you started your degree over if you failed. You know, talk about daunting. And what was really funny is you fast forward to when this was all said and done, and I was talking to the students about it, and they went, oh, you mean like the praxis? So it automatically had this idea. We weren't even thinking about the praxis when we did it. But we thought this would be a study class for a test like that. And there would be a class, we would allude to the fact that this is just one of many sections of the class. Okay, so we got that down on paper. And then we realized we needed to have some sort of antagonist, some sort of villain. But it was a little too much to have it be something happening in the classroom. So he thought, what if it was something like someone is stealing or someone is selling the answers to that test? We went, that makes perfect sense. So that way it was something that we could deal with in the class. It wasn't expected to be resolved inside of the 50-minute classroom. You know, it could still be looming over our head, although we could suggest a possible resolution. And we decided to approach it from that standpoint. So then we had to get into creating characters. And that's where fortune favored me. I was flipping through Facebook, and a man named Preston Reed had a viral video that he had made. At that time, everybody had been online for, a month and a half, 2 months? And he had done a video about all the people that we have met in Zoom meetings and all of the various idiosyncrasies. So I just wanted to show you the video that launched this whole idea. There's no audio, so don't worry, you're not going deaf. Hello. It's not. Oh. Voila. There we go. Whoop, whoop, wrong way. There we go. Okay. And as a side note, he since had 2 other volumes of this by the time we got done with the pandemic. Yeah, he staged them, yeah. course, there were no students that ever looked like that. So that was the inspiration. And I tried to scour the internet and find some sort of contact information for him. The only thing that I could do is I found his Facebook profile, and I had to take a chance because, as you know, you can send a message, but because you're not friends with somebody, you don't know if they're going to get it, if they're going to think it's spam. So I sent him a message and I said, I saw your videos. They were wonderful. I would love to, I'm thinking about writing this opera. I'd love to use some of those characters as inspiration for the opera. Is it possible to get the rights to do that? And about 2 or 3 weeks later, he contacted me. He goes, I thank you for the compliments. I've had a lot of people ask me about that. And he started throwing around some prices. And I went, whoa, there's no money for it. And as we were talking, we wound up agreeing that I was really just inspired. It wasn't that these were going to be used the way they are. These just started the pot a-boiling. And I said, would it be okay if I just said that in the credits at the end, I gave you credit saying these were inspired by characters you created? And he went, perfect, that's great. So that's what we did at the end. Rewind back to that Saturday after the first phone call. I wake up and I'm flooded with these words going through my head. Didn't know what I was doing. Had no idea of a story, although I knew, if you look at a lot of musicals and operas, and this really does blur the line. There's spoken dialogue, there's singing. You could just as easily argue that it's musical theater. But if you look at like Disney, all of these musicals start with some large ensemble piece that sets the mood, sets the idea of what's happening, reflects on the situation. And I went, we need one of those. So these thoughts came through my head, and I hope everybody has a sheet that's on the table there. There's some solo things, and those are going to be easier to understand, but the ensemble pieces I found were a little bit harder, so this way you can read the words as they're going. So I wrote down all of these words, and they just came to me. It took about an hour. Then, as I got done, the tune just popped into my head, and I did things via improvisation. So I just started humming something in my head, and I was like, oh, that's really catchy, and then I write it down. So writing the entire ensemble took another couple of hours. So I was done with the first draft of this by lunchtime that Saturday. And I sent it off to Mark, and I went, what do you think? I tried this. This is what I came up with. You think this might work? And it didn't take too long. I went, this is it. Yes, this is what we need to do. So this is online again. Whoop.
To keep us safe and slow us spread.
first set of dialogues, which, by the way, through our we needed to have somebody kick off the villain, the situation. So we approached Dr. Cavalier to be the provost of our virtual university and have him show up in the very first set of dialogues and tell everybody how he has learned in his office that the class is, the test is being sold, and that his office is doing a thorough investigation, and if anybody knows anything, please contact him as soon as possible. And he was very gracious enough to record that, but I figured he wouldn't appreciate it if I showed that part today, so I'm not. You can go to YouTube and watch the whole thing, and you can see him in all of his glory if you want. And also, the thing that worried me about this, and if you look at the ladies here that were in the opera, those high notes are not made easier by having to sit down in front of a camera. So they were troopers, and they really came through. So we get through that, get it done, still don't have a story. So I'm trying to think of, well, what else do I want in this opera? We'll figure out the story and we'll put the pieces together. And I thought it's going to be real easy for this to be doom and gloom, for everything to just be negative, for everything to be deep. We got to have some sort of comic relief. And if you think about probably the biggest underlying problem that we had in terms of Zoom classes, in terms of Zoom meetings, even to this day, it's your internet connection. You know? So I had to figure out a way to have a song that talked about the internet connection, but I needed to be able to control the internet problems. They needed to be repeatable. So I had to write that into the music. And it also meant that I needed one of the singers to have really good comedic chops that could pull it off. Because in the middle of singing, they would all of a sudden just freeze, as if the whole connection froze up. And then at a certain point, and it would have to be very seamless. So the audio would cut out, and then it would come right back in. And it had to sound like it was different. So if there was a freeze, I'll show you in the score how I had to write this. So if it was something that was just supposed to be mouthed and not sung, it was in parentheses and there wasn't a note here. And then there's some directions down here that say letters and words in parentheses are not to be sung, only mouthed, to give the illusion of audio problems unless there's a stage freeze, and then just continue after the parentheses. So then here, oh please, I want to and he's got a freeze. In his mind, I put the rest of the sentence up here, make it through, but he's got it just met this class, so that it didn't continue and make it sound like there was no stopping. It was that the sentence kept going, we just didn't get to hear it all. And I was really fortunate because I knew the students that we had, and I knew all of their abilities, and I wanted to showcase their strengths. And when he was participating, the fall, right before we went on lockdown, the music department and the visual theater arts department combined to do the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. And the student, Nylan Barr, he was hilarious. So I knew that since I'm his voice teacher, I knew what his range was and I knew all that fun stuff. So I went, if I keep this within his voice, he's gonna knock this out of the park. And I wasn't disappointed. So this is my connection.
I hope today is stronger, so far it's going well. I've been on so much longer. No way. Oh. Net connection is not good, but this is all I have here in this place. I've tried to fix the things I knew I could. I hope this prof will understand my case. what just says to hit reset. I've turned things off and on so many times. I've got the perfect audio for mimes. Oh please, I want to make this class. I'll give my internet just one last try. If I can't hear the stuff, how it's always rough no matter how I try. This Wi-Fi stuff just makes me want to cry.
So it was important for me to stop the song before it actually ended to add to that idea of everything freezing up. But what was really fun about this is even though it was designed to be the comic relief, the theme that you hear underlying in the piano wound up permeating throughout the opera. It was part of the overture, it was part of the intermission. It was the connection theme, and it really fit all sorts of things. So, it was an added benefit to what had happened. So now we turn to the situation. And the only way that we could find to deal with that was to have a student in our class that may have information about who was selling the test. Now, it wasn't going to be this person, certainly they would just know. And so they'd have this struggle about who it was, and are they supposed to tell, are they not supposed to tell? And the more we could layer those emotions, and the more I could layer it in the music and in the words, I thought it would really ground the piece. And it winds up carrying through the whole opera. So we have Taylor. There we go. So we have What Do I Do? I'm Sorry is the follow-up at the end, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we have Taylor is over here, and and I knew she would be amazing. And so that's why I wanted to give her this opera, or this role. But at this point in the process, I shouldn't be left without an adult present, because my mind just started running. I'd done the ensemble, I'd done my connection. I was gonna start really having fun with this. And it became a challenge. It's like, so I wanna do an aria, but with a virtual setting, I don't know how many of you have ever seen an opera, seen pieces of an opera, but it's usually done in two parts. So there's a recitative and there's an aria. And the recitative is at the beginning and usually doesn't have much under you in terms of accompaniment, and that's what moves the story forward. And then the aria comes and it reflects on the action that just happened. And I went, well, maybe we can pull this off. I know we're gonna have, for the most part, it's gonna be spoken dialogue, but maybe we could have some recitative in there. So then we'll have the aria, but I don't want this to be, all right, one person comes out and sings, and then we have an ensemble, then another person. That's too easy. So I wanted to have something where maybe the person sings, and then the chorus joins too, like you would see on a stage, an actual opera, where you have ensembles and solos together. So I decided to add the chorus here, and they function much like Greek chorus in plays. They're talking about the drama that's going on, and oh my gosh, through all this stuff, the drama on class, you just stop. But then they switch, and Taylor starts talking about the drama, and they start talking about what should she do. And then they finally join together at the end. And it really made for an effective piece. In fact, when we got back to school, we were doing programs out under the tent. And this is one of the pieces that Mark decided to include in those concerts because it could function live. And it was one of the first things that people could hear, kind of to tease them into what was coming in the spring.
They've started looking and asking questions. I don't know what to do. but no one will ever believe me. They said they did it with good intentions. They said just wait and see.
The words to this are in the paper as well.
They'll call me in, I see it now. They'll ask me what I know. Am I the one that they're looking for? Should I say yes or no? Not long ago, I learned the truth. I need to get it off my chest, but still I wonder, should I admit? I saw my parents severed first. What do I do? Where do I go? Do I confess to what I know? Should I keep quiet and play my part? Or should I listen to my heart? This crisis turns into storm, getting hard to cope with now. Just when we think that it is over, something else so by. Aspire to middle class, I made it here on my own. Money's tight, they were trying to help, but now I feel so alone. What should she do? Where should she go? Should she confess to what she knows? Should she keep quiet and play her part? Or should she listen to her heart? What do I do? I'm getting close to what I know. Just when we think that it is over, something else my heart. Should I listen to my heart?
Hello? Can you go to the next one, please? So we wanted to have something at the end of the opera that kind of alludes to what happens. I'm going to say something, and then I need to qualify it quickly because there will be musicologists and musicians that will take away my music card. I took a page from Mozart's book. I am not saying that I am Mozart. Please do not take that. No. I'm just saying, if you've ever heard the opera Così fan tutte, he throws in a lot of things, and yet at the end, it's never truly resolved. He leaves it up to the stage director, he leaves it up to the audience to determine, so what happens? And this is kind of, we allude to it, but it's never really spelled out what happens. All we know is that Taylor wants to take a minute, she wants to speak to the class and tell them what's going on. And if you listen, you'll hear What Do I Do in the piano.
May I say just one last thing? You've always been so nice to me. This no investigation will go away real soon, because I know also the test you see. And while I can't give you any names, rest assured, you will all be off the hook very soon. I'm sorry, you may not know this, but I'm hurting too. I'm sorry. Once it's over, I can promise you I'll need some time to readjust and work real hard to rebuild your trust. As soon as class is over, I'll tell them what I know. I hope they'll understand my plight. And once the truth is out and this burden lifted off, with you I hope to try to make this right. I'm sorry, I didn't know until it was too late. I'm sorry. If you were in my shoes, you would relate to what I have at stake and the choice I have to make. I'm sorry.
So we really don't know if she's going to give up her folks or just tell them what she knows. And so it's a lot of fun. Then we get to the piece. When I got done with this next piece, I know you're all here. This next piece is my favorite. You know, you get done with it, and you put everything you have into it, and the message hits, and the music hits, and it's like, you know, this piece was, in my opinion, the heartbeat of the opera. It summed up all of the issues that the students had said when we were thinking about the comments that were made, the issues, the comments from faculty, comments from friends, and it really reflected what was going on and how people were handling it. And I knew the person that was going to sing it, and I knew she was going to just aim for the fence on this one, and it was wonderful. It's one of those songs, in my mind, if you think about, you know, your favorite musical, you think about your favorite opera, if you have one, one piece usually is representative of that. And that's what, to me, that's what this song is.
Late mornings are the best for taking classes. The students flock to their just a cheese. For me it makes no sense. The pressure I feel is too intense. Yet everyone said this class would be a breeze. I'm trying. I want it known I do my best, but my story's different than the rest. I'm trying. I struggle to maintain. It's making me insane, and yet I honestly can say I'm trying. I want my folks to understand this year is getting out of hand. I'm trying. I wish that I could grin and finally start to win. Till then, all I've got to say is that I'm trying. My teachers are concerned with how I'm doing and say I need more work to pass this test. They think that I'm a flake, but I am not. For heaven's sake, why can't they see that I'm so damn depressed? And now my hope is gone. Either pass or fail, I'm moving on, but I want to graduate, that's why. I'm trying. I want it known I do my best, but my story's different than the rest. I'm trying. I struggle to maintain. It's making me insane, and yet I honestly can say I'm trying. I want my folks to understand this year is getting out of hand. I'm trying. I wish that I could grin and finally start to win. Until then, all I've got to say is that I'm trying.
So, I didn't add it 4 times. All right. I'm not showing everything. There are plenty. If you want to go to YouTube, you can just type in New Normal and my last name, and it'll pop right up. You can see the whole thing. The class is a class of 50 minutes. But I wanted to make sure equal time, equal voice, and we all have students that preferred to be online. So it was important that they had a voice too. And for whatever reason, and I tried to incorporate as many as I could in this next piece, called I Like It. I realized in order to get as much information and as many different opinions as possible, I had to put more people in it. So it's a trio. And as I was thinking about it, I was inspired by 2 different musicians, musical ideas. We need to go to the next one, please. All right. The first, if you're not familiar, can we go? There we go. Is a piano rag by Scott Joplin called Solace. And I'm sure you've heard it, but just to give you a little sample of. So you have this feeling, this relaxed, calm, easy feeling. You can go ahead and stop it, please. And then the second influence, and I enjoyed this, the music of Jimmy Buffett. You know, there's no one that's more relaxed than Jimmy. And I knew that there had to be some way I could incorporate all of these things and have some fun. And again, I shouldn't be left alone to my own devices because I thought, hey, maybe I can incorporate an instrument too. And I have to admit, when I first sent this to Mark to have him look at it and see, I went, okay, I did this, it's fun, please don't hate me. And I was hoping for the best, and he sent it back and goes, I think this is great, this is hilarious. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it, I like it. But since there aren't really any instruments in dorm rooms, it's a paperclip holder, and the paperclips create the sound.
The other students complain a lot. I hear their whines and pleas. Oh, where's my coffee? For me, I think that this ain't so bad. It comes to possibilities.
I join the class in my jammies. I eat while the teacher begins. My new classroom is in my bedroom.
Why can't they see these oranges?
Seriously, could this be any more relaxing?
And that's not even the best part. Our class is taught this way. Not just these classes and comfort. Our class can join us every day. This is Carlos. So I like it that they are worried.
And understand their concern.
I hope it stays this way forever.
There's no better way to learn.
So we get through, I got everything written before school started. So I was able to crank out all 12 songs, as well as an overture, an intermission, and end credits. And then we had to put everything together. So, as I said, you know, I did an overture for this, and that was really fun. There are a number of different kinds of overtures. If you go through music history, we won't get into all of them, but one of them that's really popular, especially in musical theater, is called a potpourri overture. And what that means is they take themes from all of the various hit songs that happen in the show, and they put them together in a medley kind of thing at the beginning. So it kind of lets you know what's coming. You know, and this, you can go to Carmen. Carmen has a big potpourri overture. All the hit tunes are in it. And you can listen to it. It's really popular in musical theater. So I had that, and then I had to put this all together. I'm sitting here thinking, you know, people aren't at a table. They aren't at a computer. So I've got to bring them into this Zoom meeting. So I have to create a computer. I've got to create the whole process behind this. And as I'm putting all the, there's so many different layers. I mean, I needed Photoshop to create my Zoom class. If you notice, all the singers are wearing earbuds. That's because they're listening to the piano that you're hearing, but the video they sent me is just their voice. And then I had to go and layer that music back in and make sure everything lined up and make it sound good and make sure it's balanced and all of that fun stuff. That was part of that learning process that caused me to panic in the summer. But I also, when I came to the beginning of this, I had to create my own telecommunications software that we could use, because I certainly wasn't paying Zoom for the rights to do this. You know, but I came up with what's called Vroom. I mean, you know, parody, right? And so there was we start off as if you're getting to a computer, and then it quickly phases to where you're just focusing on the computer, and you can see as we move in. So this is that entire opening sequence with the overture, so you can see how it all springboards and starts off. So when all was said and done, there turned out there was a fringe benefit that I hadn't even planned on that worked. We'll get to the questions in just a second. I wanted to make this, like I said, I wanted this to be as accessible as I could to the students, make this as easy a process for them as I could do it. And because I was able to figure out a way to do that, I was able to use those same things, those same techniques with my church choir. Because we couldn't perform, we weren't even in church. And I was able to do a virtual choir. And you can imagine when you have a choir that is mostly retirees and you're asking them to do something this technical, it darn well better be easy. And they all took to it real simple. They had a lot of fun, and all because, I decided to not panic and do this. So thank you. Are there any questions? Yep. Really good question, but you already know the answer. No. So she asked about the rehearsal strategy. Well, my colleague, Dr. Young, and I, we divvy up. She was the music director, because I knew the music, so I was going to let her do that. And then I was doing all the rest of this putting together, so I was the stage director. And it was a matter of having the music. We had a MIDI file that I had when I created the pieces to begin with, and the students could use that while we waited for Dr. Jean to play and make these recordings, because these are the recordings they were going to actually record with. And what they did was, as soon as they felt comfortable enough with the music and we'd worked on it together and we'd tweaked it and worked on their characterization, then they went about recording it, and I was able to put it all together and figure out where things were going. There is a teacher in this. When you saw the big grid, the gentleman right in the middle, he plays the teacher, and he has a really funny aria too. But that was an interesting part, was trying to figure that out. As Dr. Alexander pointed out, you're trying to deal with, is everything not just being sung correctly, but healthily? Are they factoring in proper singing technique? Are they supporting? I have yet to see students come to class and sit up straight when they're in a Zoom meeting, and yet that's kind of, rule number one when it comes to singing. So at the same time, I didn't want them to look like they were sitting at the table like this because they were trying to support. So we had to make it look natural. We had to make it look like this was just a classroom and the audience was sitting in on 50 minutes and watching the struggle. So, yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anything they wanted. I had the right of last refusal, and they could show me what they were interested in. If they wanted jammies or they wanted this, their robe, anything was fine, because the idea was to make it look as natural as possible. And interestingly, I forgot to mention this, you'd be surprised at what the hardest part of creating this opera was. Can anybody guess? You'll never guess. Coming up with names for the characters. I spent so much time trying to figure out how I was going to name these characters. Finally, I contacted Mark and said, I can't do it. Just name them, please. So Mark came up with the names, and he also came up with the dialogue that Dr. Cavalier did. And then he helped me fine-tune the things that I was doing. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yep. It was wherever they were able to make the recordings. There was one student that was in a practice room in the building, somewhere in their dorms, and they had to deal with other things. And we had one video that was submitted, and there was a lot of outside noise that, and at one point it needed to be re-recorded because it was just too much outside noise. I couldn't get rid of it. But once a little bit could be filtered out, and that just helped me to figure out how to do this even better and make the sound better. But yeah, that's part of the trying to make it as easy for them as possible. It wasn't going to be a set place. The idea was, you're in your dorm, you're going to class, what would you wear, where would you be, and the more natural you can do it, the better. Yeah, I thought about it, but you couldn't hear the music. So that's how much it had gotten. I was like, I wish, but no. Yes? Why? Because there was nothing else to do. And because we needed to figure out a way to do things healthy and stay safe. That's kind of in that Online Again song, and that there's some truth there. I mean, they were telling us you couldn't even go to the store. So how are you going to sing in public when the CDC had determined that singing was a super spreader event? And just being in the room, everybody singing and aerosolizing the virus made you that much more susceptible to the problem. So finding something that made it safe and still productive, and not something that the students couldn't be proud of, but something that they worked just as hard as I did once we got into the process. Yes? Nope. All of it was in a vacuum. Yep. That's where they had to listen to just the piano. And then it was up to me to take all of those audio files, and there were micro adjustments when people weren't quite lining up, and I'd have to move things over just a millisecond, and all of a sudden everything fell into place. And then I'd take the next person, I'd layer that in. And then once I had the audio file, then I had to do the same with all of the video files and make sure that you could tell this person was singing these words for fear of it looking like an old Godzilla movie. We didn't want that. Good questions. Anything else? Yes? Would I re-record it? I would love to. I would love another shot at it. Because since then my skills have grown in terms of this, and I can do a lot more things. I know that I know for a fact, well, I shouldn't say for a fact, I'm fairly certain that one of the reasons I didn't win, I was a finalist for the virtual performance, but I didn't win and I didn't place in the competition, is because of the audio quality. But in my mind, it added to the fact that this was a Zoom class. So I wouldn't change that. But when I saw the productions that did place, it was professional quality recording, it was professional video editing, and that wasn't what the intent was. This wasn't supposed to be a refined thing. what we have is exactly what we wanted. There are just little things that I might fix and clean up a bit. It'd be fun. Anything else? Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate you listening. Stand up. If you were in it, why don't you stand up?